Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today we are featuring Helga, Skittish Seer. It is a 3 mana 1/3 frog, and whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, you gain 1 life and you put a 1/1 counter on Helga. In addition to that, Helga also has an activated ability, so you can tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is Helga's power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana costs. Even though it doesn't look like it, this frog is the perfect Hydra commander, and due to the fact that we are in banned colors, we have access to a lot of different cards. Hydra spells that we want to cast are, for example, Primordial Hydra, a 2 green and X 0/0, and it enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on it, and it has trample as long as it has 10 or more +1/+1 counters on it. Gargos, Vicious Watcher, a 6 mana 8/7 with vigilance, and Hydra spells you cast cost 4 generic less to cast, which is a great discount that will accelerate your game plan. And whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, Gargos, Vicious Watcher fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. We play Colonian Hydra, a 5 mana 0/0 with trample, and it enters with 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and whenever it attacks, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Due to the fact that we want to swing immediately, we play Zorok and Goreclaw, a 6 mana 6/5 with trample, and other creatures you control have trample. And whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and it gains haste until end of turn. A creature that already has haste is Goldvein Hydra, a 1 green and X 0/0 with vigilance, trample and haste, and it enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies you create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. We play Iron Scale Hydra, a 5 mana 5/5, and if a creature would deal combat damage to it, you prevent that damage and put a 1/1 counter on Iron Scale Hydra. We have to be fast, so we play a lot of different ramp spells, for example Nature's Law, a 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. Explore, for 2 mana you cast a sorcery that lets you play an additional land in this turn and you draw a card. Rampant Growth, a 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Free Visits, a 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. Fast Seek, a 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a plains, island, swamp or mountain card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle, with which you will most likely always find your Triumph. And if you don't have enough mana yet, once you brought out one of your powerful Hydras, you can cast Traverse the Outlands, a 5 mana sorcery, search a library for up to X basic land cards where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Due to the fact that a lot of our Hydra spells are in green, we also play Emerald Medallion, a 2 mana artifact. Green spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. We have access to a lot of different interaction spells, so we play Dawn's Truce, a 2 mana instant, so you can gift a card to an opponent as you cast the spell, and you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. If the gift was promised, permanents you control also gain indestructible until end of turn. If you want to protect one of your key creatures, you play Slip Out the Back, a 1 mana instant, put a 1/1 counter on target creature and it phases out. If you don't like the spell that is being cast, you play Counterspell, a 2 mana instant, counter target spell. Heroic Intervention, a 2 mana instant, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. If you have to get rid of a nasty creature, you play Swords to Plowshares, a 1 mana instant, exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. And if you want to reset the board for your opponents, you just overload Cyclonic Rift, a 2 mana instant, return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, and you can also overload it for 7 mana. We also play a lot of powerful and helpful enchantments like Innkeeper's Talent, a 2 mana enchantment class, and on the first level, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. On the second level, permanents you control with counters on them have Ward 1, and on the third stage, if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. We play Hardened Scales, a 1 mana enchantment, and if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on it instead. Branching Evolution, a 3 mana enchantment, and if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. Garruk's Uprising, a 3 mana enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card. Your creatures have trample, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. Guardian Project, a 4 mana enchantment, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. And we also play Broker's Ascendancy, a 3 mana enchantment, and at the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. You want to win more? You get it. Herald of Secret Streams, a 4 mana 2/3, and creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. All of your Hydras will accumulate +1/+1 counters on them, so making them unblockable will let you kick out a player within 1 turn. Damning Verdict, a 5 mana sorcery, destroy all creatures with no counters on them. Helga and all of your Hydras will have +1/+1 counters on them, so this is basically a board wipe for all of your opponents, which will clear the path for you to swing for the win. Unbound Flourishing, a 3 mana enchantment, and whenever you cast a permanent spell with a mana value cost that contains X, double the value of X. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell or activate an ability, if that spell's mana cost or that ability's activation cost contains X, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. If you're in a spot that you cannot even spend that much mana on one of your Hydra spells, Unbound Flourishing will help you to pump out even a very powerful creature. Last but not least, we play Pholocranos Reborn, a 3 mana 4/5 with reach, and for 6 generic and 1 white Phyrexian mana you can transform it into Pholocranos Engine of Ruin, a 6 mana 6/6 with reach and lifelink, and whenever it or another non-token Hydra you control dies, create a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra creature token with reach and a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra creature token with lifelink. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Helga, Skittish Seer. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say see you on the next one. Goodbye guys.